Senate Republican primary. Americans, it seems, are starting to see through the Trump antics. A new Fox News poll shows his approval rating dropping 5 points to 44%. His disapproval rising 5 points to 54%. This is in keeping with trends we're seeing in other national polls. Joining me now, the White House reporter for the Los Angeles Times, Eli Stokols. His new piece dives into the question of why, despite the terrible human cost so far, there isn't a greater sense of shared grief in America. Also, Eddie Glaude Jr., professor at Princeton University and the chair of the Department of African American Studies. He is also an MSNBC contributor. Good morning to you, gentlemen. It's a somber morning. We're not quite at that 100,000 number, but round numbers make us visit things. It's also Memorial Day, where we're thinking about soldiers in lost times. Eddie, what's the issue here? We may be close to the peak, which means we are going to lose a lot more people on the way down from this peak, and the president does seem to have lost focus on this issue.
Well, you remember Dr. Fauci a few months ago telling us that if we did everything right, we could see between 100,000 and 240,000 dead. And here we are on the precipice of 100,000 souls gone, and we're opening up our economy. What we see, I think, Ali, is that kind of greed and selfishness is over-determining how we move in this country. And we also see, I think, that for Donald Trump, there are folks who are disposable, folks whose lives don't really come into view. He lacks a sense of sympathy and empathy for those who are not in his immediate purview. So I think at the end of the day, and I should say this with a little bit of caution, I know it might sound a bit hyperbolic, I think we're witnessing the death rattle of a particular version of America. And Donald Trump represents in a very stark way all that is wrong with us. And we need to understand that for what it is, Alan.
Eli, let's talk about the people who have died. We talk about a new normal. We talk about getting to a new normal. We talk about reopening. We talk about moving on. We talk about turning the corner. But in fact, no matter what you use to describe 100,000 people, it's not the same as 100,000 people at a baseball stadium or at a sporting event. It's 100,000 lives lost, families who have been torn apart from their loved ones, many not able to see their dying relatives in hospital, many not able to grieve properly or to hold a normal funeral. It's much bigger than 100,000 people.
It is a staggering number, Ali. It's really a hard thing for the country, it seems, especially an atomized country as we live in now, to absorb and to process and to feel. You're not seeing the same kind of collective expressions of grief. Perhaps part of that is because people can't go outside. A lot of people are staying at home. But there's no television images. There's nothing to see. All these deaths are somewhat invisible. And there's the national trauma. It's just we don't know exactly how this will be felt and how this will manifest, in the future. But what we can see with that New York Times front page and what we tried to get at in our reporting this weekend is to examine why this has been such a fragmented, polarized response. Donald Trump is not the reason why the country is divided, but he has exacerbated the division during his time in office. It's crucial to his politics, and he has politicized the question of whether or not to stay home or wear a mask. He has questioned his own government when it comes to, say, the FDA study on hydroxychloroquine, watering down the CDC guidelines, offering optimism, contradicting the sort of, more dire warnings from his public health experts like Dr. Fauci. And in terms of the death count and looking at it, yes, this president has ordered flags at half-staff this weekend. Yes, he has read recitations of empathy over the victims and said continually that one life lost is too many. But this is a person who his entire life and political career has always been obsessed with numbers, with polls, with ratings. And this 100,000 deaths is one number that he is very loath to talk about. We're seeing him, his Twitter feed is a pretty good distillation of what's going through his mind. And what we've seen over the last 24, 48 hours, a lot of focus on grievance, on enemies, on other issues, voting by mail. He is not paying attention. A lot of people took that New York Times front page last night and were tweeting out the names of some of these victims. Donald Trump, meanwhile, is tweeting attacks, old attacks on Hillary Clinton, on Joe Scarborough, on Jeff Sessions. It gives you a pretty clear contrast of where his head is at